Well, many of you have been watching the news and YouTube creators alike as they've talked about the Kylie Rodney missing persons case over in Truckee, California. The news today of her recovery by my friends over at Adventures with Purpose is sad, but hopefully allows the family to grapple with the realities of Kylie's death and no longer deal with the horrors of the unknown. Let's talk about what we learned from cases like this. Well, hey, everybody, welcome to Profiling Evil in this special edition talking about the Kylie Rodney case. Please take a minute, if you would, hit that like and subscribe button. You know, there's a lot of frustration out there right now around why a small dive team, Adventures with Purpose, can find a missing person when law enforcement and experienced search and rescue efforts have been combing the area for the last 2 weeks without any success. Well, you know, there's a couple of reasons, and I don't know if you caught the interview early on, but the detective early on said that they were moving very slowly to not disturb water. Now, I don't know how much is true to that, or if they thought it's just so close, we're not going to pay close attention to this area. I'm going to talk about a couple of things, especially dealing with geography, that I think play a big difference in these kinds of cases, and I wish it was paid more attention to earlier on. Let's recap things that brought us to today, though. First, Kylie Rodney vanished after attending a party at Tahoe National Park back on August 6th. Now, that was about 2 weeks ago. The only evidence investigators had at the time was that she was captured on CCTV in a business about 6 hours before she disappeared, and that she communicated with her mother just before midnight saying that she was coming home. Now, I want to talk about risk reduction a little in this episode, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm victim blaming here. This is the reality of these kinds of cases, and perhaps this is a place where you and I can talk to our kids or our grandkids about how to reduce their own levels of risk. You see, young people from all around the world continue to disappear at terribly high rates. The families, friends, and the community are left asking, how can this keep happening? Well, I want to explore that while the emotions are a little bit high. And my hope is that it might help you, and again, help your family members to teach your children, and perhaps even yourselves, how to avoid being victimized, or at least how to reduce the risk of being victimized. I mean, think about this for a moment. Kylie is a 16-year-old girl. All of the evidence available on social media and in the news suggests that she's talented and intelligent. She graduated early from high school, a year early, planning to go to college and pursue an arts degree in music. Now, she was last seen driving her silver Honda with California tags. Everybody agrees that Kylie arrived at the high school graduation party at the Prosser family campground in Tahoe National Park. News reports suggest that the crowd grew rapidly to as many as 300 people. Now, I don't know what the size of the graduating class is, but Truckee's a little bit smaller area. But there were at least 300 people partying there, according to all the reports. And according to friends, Kylie was drinking alcohol. There were also reports suggesting others were doing drugs. Well, by 11:30 p.m., Kylie texted her mother that she was planning on leaving the party shortly after midnight with intentions to come straight home. She never made it. Now, listen, let's talk about risk here. She, by all accounts, has gone to this party alone. She's consuming alcohol. She's in an area that maybe she's familiar with, maybe she's not. It's pretty close to her home. But all the while, her risk levels are increasing while she's out there. Alcohol reduces our ability to think clearly. We don't know if there were predators out there that were trying to take advantage or may have taken advantage of this young woman. There are so many theories bouncing around, but to me, this from the beginning seemed like an accident, probably fueled by alcohol consumption. And, you know, that's just the most probable thing. that it probably wasn't human trafficking or an assault or all the other things that people are throwing out there as ideas. Now, that said, we can't discount that something criminal could have happened to this young woman as she was leaving the party. But there's nothing coming out of the interviews that suggests there was a kidnapping or sexual assault or anything like that I think is credible. Now, think about this. 300 kids. I just don't believe they can keep a secret if something really nefarious and planned happened. It just doesn't make sense. It isn't quite as sensational and as spooky to think about, but the forensic evidence just isn't backing this up. And the only forensic evidence that I've seen that's credible is that Kylie's mobile phone was somewhere near the campground. And that, in and of itself, is problematic. You see, I did some analysis on the cellular infrastructure in the area, and I found that there are a number of really good cellular sites, the omnidirectional and built into sectors. But I can't confirm the quality near the location where Kylie was. Now, maybe people local to the area can tell us what it was like. But this first map is showing us where Kylie lives and where the party was being held, a distance of only about 5 miles by way of a crow's flight. Now, in reality, it's a 9-mile drive from point A, her home, to point B, the party location. But even then, that's only about a 15-minute drive. Now, this is really significant when we consider the options for getting home or from going home to the party. It's really important here, and this is where geography plays such an important role. Whenever I have the chance to offer any ideas to my friends over at Adventures with Purpose, this always plays a major role. For instance, if we theorize that Kylie had full intentions of going home, like she told her mother and like she texted, the areas where the accident could occur become more prescriptive in nature, more narrow. Now, think about this. If we consider her route that she would have driven to and from that party, and let's assume there was a traffic accident, that she was intoxicated or that she tried to avoid hitting a deer or something, she's probably not going to go very far off the road unless she were to take an exit and, with the water levels down, maybe try to drive along the beach or do some other kinds of things. But if we were to just simply create a 200-foot buffer on the road, we start to see areas that are of much higher interest, like the reservoir, frankly, at this point, and the place where she was found. It becomes very interesting and always worth closer inspection. Then we take the forensic information that we have, which in this case is the cellular pings that are near the campground. Now, again, by examining the location of the cellular towers in the area, we might assume that there's pretty good reception, which could equate to a better pinpoint of Kylie's location. This map shows that there are a lot of cell towers in the area, but here's the tricky part. Keep in mind that this area actually represents more than 1,500 square miles. That's 1,500 square miles. There's really only one tower that appears close to the campground, and a single tower makes that process of locating a mobile device really difficult. You see, mobile device location is determined by a process called triangulation, or a computation based on the 3 closest cellular towers. This is something I work in every day with 911 centers all around the world. Now, looking at these towers, frankly, I have less confidence in how accurate the cellular ping would have been in this particular case. Unless law enforcement somehow was able to obtain the device's actual GPS location off of the device. Sometimes that's granted in programs like Find Friends on Apple devices. Now, I communicated with Jared Leisek of Adventures with Purpose a few days ago as the team was traveling to the search site. I just want you to know, I didn't have anything to do with what they've done. I was thrilled they were involved because it not only represented getting their special capabilities on site, but it showed a willingness on law enforcement's part to bring a private organization into an ongoing investigation. In short, I wasn't a bit surprised that Doug Bishop and his team were able to find Kylie, and quite frankly, and very sadly, I congratulate them and publicly thank them and acknowledge them for their selfless service. And before I forget, I'm seeing a lot of comments out there and a lot of things being said about the vehicle being upside down in the water. This isn't that uncommon, folks. Think about it. If the car, once it hits the water, floats for a few moments before sinking, it could begin to list and roll, much like the Titanic as it fills with water. Then, when it hits the bottom of that river or the lake or the bottom of that water body, regardless of whether it was on its wheels or not, the forward momentum or the momentum to the side could create the artifact that seems to be so troubling to us right now, but in reality is explainable by physics. I hope that helps. Now, in closing, I want to talk about the most difficult part of my video today, and that has to do with lowering our personal levels of risk. I mean, this is really a painful question to ask. And again, I'm not victim blaming, so please don't write me any notes. But I'm certainly going to ask you if you think there's any responsibility for personal actions that need to be considered. I mean, think about it. This kid was alone. This kid was drinking. This kid was in areas that may or may not be well lit. There are lots of things that increase her risk as things go along, not to mention the possibility that there could have been a predator out there. We just don't know until the investigation goes on. A few years ago, I worked with my good friend, Greg Cooper of the Cold Case Foundation, on how to harden a process that was called the Victim Risk Continuum by the FBI. In there, Greg and I determined, after looking at hundreds of criminal and missing person cases, that there are responsibilities that we all assume when we make decisions. For instance, if we decide to walk out of a mall in the middle of the night across a dark parking lot to our vehicle that happens to have a group of people hanging out near it, our risk levels are going to go up. Versus if we were to ask the security guard to walk out with us or drive us to our vehicle, our risk levels are mitigated or lowered. Every decision we make has the ability to either increase our risks or decrease our risks. When we think about the risk continuum, we look at it in a couple of ways. First is low-risk victims and high-risk victims. Now, I want to start with high-risk victims. These would be people like those in the sex trade industry or people working in illegal narcotic transactions or things like that. Now, what we have learned statistically is that high-risk victims, when they become victimized, are usually victims of opportunity. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in really bad circumstances. Now, what's really interesting about this is when we look at kids like Kylie, we see kids that really are probably more low risk. And when we have low risk victims, those victims are generally victimized by someone who's known to them. And this is the frightening part. They're targets of the aggression against them. But there are three things that can change that low-risk victim's risk level. Those are situations, circumstances, and environments. In essence, if Kylie, and I don't know her well, if Kylie were a low-risk person, doing well in school, has a close circle of friends, ends up going to a party where there's drinking and drug abuse and all kinds of things that are going right outside of a place where she normally is, her risk levels are increasing. If she's intoxicated and gets behind a wheel, her risk levels are increasing. If there's a predator lurking in the shadows or dancing next to the fire with her, her risk levels are increasing. When she starts to make that drive home because of situation, circumstance, and environment, what may normally be a low-risk person is becoming rapidly a high-risk person. I hope that helps, and I wonder what your thoughts are on the victim risk continuum and frankly, on our ultimate responsibility for the kinds of risk we're willing to accept. Now, there are certainly cases where victims of crime have done everything right and they still fall prey to a predator. We may find that that's the case as this case begins to develop and unfolds, that Kylie fell in that category. But personally, I think it's less likely. Hey, I want to thank you for watching Profiling Evil tonight, and I hope that you're going to hit that like and subscribe button. And I don't know if you noticed my t-shirt here. I'm wearing the new Profiling Evil t-shirt. Gotta just invite you to get some swag here. It's the new one that says, "See, say, and hear no evil." I hope you'll check it out, and the links are down below to get over to our merchandise. Now listen, folks, thanks again for watching and for hitting that like and subscribe button. Remember, you can find Profiling Evil on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you like podcasts, go over and hit our podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. This year, we've been focusing on cults among us, and it's been a blast to talk about some of these things and explore how similar they are and how many different kinds of things are going on there. And don't forget, check us out on the web at profilingevil.com. Hey, we just won a national award for our podcasts. And I'm going to tell you a little more about that maybe down the road a little bit, but I hope you're taking time to listen to those. Hey, thanks, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.